Thank you for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today. Severe winter weather hits the Northeast, causing major delays and cancellations at airports.
We had a huge snowstorm, and oh my goodness, they canceled the flight because they were scared that we wouldn't be able to take off.
We have more details coming up. The extremist group ISIS is making a comeback in Syria. Now many are fleeing the area to escape the conflict. We'll give you a closer look, and
we have these machines emerging, and people are beginning to worship those machines.
Rapid developments in technology are a big part of our everyday lives. But what are some dangers of this for people of faith? All these stories and more are next.
This is CBN Newswatch.
We begin with a powerful winter storm hitting the Northeast and the nation's capital. Heavy snow pounding the region, bringing the federal government to a halt and grounding thousands of flights. Many places are still digging out as temperatures plunge, and more snow could be on the way. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story from Washington.
It's winter in Washington, the U.S. Capitol blanketed in snow, bringing the federal government to a halt. Even President Biden caught in the storm, returning from Delaware in the blinding snow. At D.C.'s 3 major airports, half of all flights delayed or canceled Monday. And across the country, more than 3,000 flights grounded, the most since the holiday chaos started.
I'm tired. I'm drained. I'm ready to go home.
On the roads, more than 500 crashes in Virginia alone. Heavy wet snow falling in Maryland, too.
The visibility is extremely bad, and the road is absolutely snow-covered.
Parts of the South not spared either. In northern Alabama, a recorded 6 inches of snow. Parts of the Florida Panhandle getting a dusting, too. Across the country, nearly 1 million homes and businesses are without power, and temperatures are plunging, as much as 15 to 20 degrees below average in many parts of the country. 2 more rounds of snow for D.C. and the Northeast could be on the way later this week. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
And now to the latest on the pandemic. 12 to 15-year-old children are likely to be eligible for booster shots. The Food and Drug Administration authorizing those shots on Monday, just as most kids were headed back to the classroom.
I think it's safe for them to do so. There's a lot schools can do to keep infection numbers lower, improve ventilation, have kids and adults masking, vaccinate everybody who's eligible.
They're also recommending everyone 12 and older who are already vaccinated to get a booster shot after 5 months. This comes as COVID-19 cases continue to surge. More than 1 million new cases were reported in the United States Monday. It is the highest number for a single day since the pandemic started. Cases for children also a new high, with 325,000 testing positive just in the last week. Israeli warplanes launched strikes against terrorist targets in the Gaza Strip Sunday. Those attacks came after terrorists inside Gaza fired 2 missiles that landed off the coast of central Israel. Hamas's ultimate goal: to wipe out the Jewish nation from the face of the earth. Chris Mitchell brings us the story. He's reporting from Jerusalem.
The Israel Defense Forces said it struck rocket manufacturing sites and Hamas military targets in Gaza. The strikes mark only the second incident between Hamas and Israel since a ceasefire ended an 11-day war last May. One expert examined that conflict and tells CBN News what you heard about the causes may not be so accurate. During that war, Hamas fired more than 3,000 rockets into Israel. Israel's Iron Dome shot down about 90% of those rockets, while the IDF responded with surgical strikes against the terror group's military infrastructure inside Gaza. Jonathan Schanzer writes in his new book, Gaza Conflict 2021, that much of the media covering the war got it wrong.
A lot of people talk about fake news. I'm not sure that applies here. I'm not even sure that the word bias applies here. The problem was it was almost as if the West and the Middle Eastern media, and I would actually say that includes Israeli media as well as Arabic media, it seemed like they were covering 2 different wars entirely.
The majority of those reports stated the war began over disturbances on the Temple Mount. and a real estate dispute in a Jerusalem neighborhood.
That was all over the Western press, but yet people just decided to ignore the fact that Palestinian elections were canceled and that Hamas was angry and looking to make a splash, and that's exactly what they did by launching the war. People forget, they talk about how angry they are at Israel when it responds to these rockets, which, by the way, these are provocations by Hamas. Israel's responses are almost entirely defensive in nature.
Schanzer says much of the media also failed to mention Hamas's covenant to destroy Israel, their violent beliefs, and main funding source, Iran.
How much it has invested financially in Hamas, how much is it invested in the rockets, in the mortars, in the tunnels, in all of the weaponry that we saw used during this conflict. People sort of guess or think that somehow Hamas builds up this arsenal organically. That is not what happens. They get it from specific sources, and it usually tracks back to the Islamic Republic in Tehran.
Given the mainstream media support for creating a Palestinian state, many news outlets fail to recognize that Hamas is a tyrannical organization dominating the people of Gaza.
They have no freedom. And meanwhile, Hamas continues to divert all of the building materials and other resources that come in for the benefit of the people of Gaza. They divert that toward the war machine. So they say that they're fighting on behalf of the Palestinian cause, but meanwhile leave 2 million people in utter misery, subjecting them to the whims of the Hamas leadership, who periodically decide to fight Israel with almost certain knowledge that they're going to lose the war, but they wage it for public relations gains.
Schanzer says recent terror attacks inside Israel, inspired by Hamas, signal an attempt to push Israel into another military conflict, a war Schanzer believes might not be too far away.
When you talk to Israeli officials, they'll tell you that Gaza is still on a knife's edge. Hamas always has the ability to take things from calm to war in a very rapid fashion. That is the concern. Hamas knows exactly what buttons to push, whether it's attacks against civilians, whether it's rockets on Jerusalem or rockets on Israel's very populated Mediterranean coast, the center waistline of Israel, as they call it. These are things that Hamas knows if they want to spark a war, they can. So the question is, how much longer will calm hold?
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Religious freedom is under attack around the world, and persecution can lead to slavery, torture, and even death. CBN News chief political analyst David Brody spoke with former Congressman Tom Garrett, who's trying to raise public support and money for a documentary aimed at breaking ground on this tragic and important issue.
70 million refugees worldwide displaced from their homes due to religious persecution. As a former congressman, Thomas Garrett has seen the tragedy up close. He played an instrumental role in getting Sudan to release imprisoned Christian pastors and help in bringing their families to the United States. He leads the way in a new trailer for a documentary called Exile.
So these guys have been here 6 years. So you remember your home and you miss your home. So why does he have to come here?
Because ISIS.
We're going to move out of here and try not to set any bombs off and remember what we've seen so that the world doesn't forget.
Garrett believes he's found his purpose.
God's put us all here, every one of us, for a reason. And I believe in that butterfly effect. I'm not a hippie, right? But I mean, like, you do something good for somebody that causes them to do something good, and it ultimately might change the world. And so Matt comes to me and says, will you do exileseries.com? Will you do this project? And I'm like, what? Seriously. And I like feeling small, right? If you like going to the desert or the ocean or the mountains, to know that there's something so much bigger than us.
And right now, the biggest challenge is getting the 6-part documentary series made. Right now, the funding is coming from ordinary Americans through crowdfunding. Producers say big studios won't touch it because of financial interest in many countries where religious persecution is present.
Hollywood won't tell this story,
No, they're not gonna tell
and
it.
here's why.
They're not gonna tell
We've been to the big studios.
Yeah, why?
They've said, oh, great product. Can you do it without talking bad about China? And I said,
what?
Right.
They actually said China?
Oh, well, there are other bad actors, but
Yeah.
China was named. And I said, that's like making a documentary about the Beatles and not mentioning John.
Garrett and filmmaker Matt Whitworth are determined to succeed without corporate support. And time is of the essence. More than 340 million Christians live under high levels of persecution. as well as Muslims, Jews, and many other faiths.
My duty as a Christian is to help Jews, to help Muslims, to help Yazidis, to help Sikhs, to help Hindus, to help human beings. That's what Jesus would have wanted us to do.
They've got Jesus on their side. Now they need money too. David Brody, CBN News.
And you can find out more about this documentary by going to cbnnews.com. Coming up, millions have left the area of northern Syria as the militant group ISIS is starting to make a comeback. We're going to bring you an inside look at the situation. It's all coming up next, right here on CBN NewsWatch. ISIS was emboldened after the disastrous U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. In Syria, the group is taking ground again for the first time since 2017. CBN contributor Chuck Holton traveled to the city of Raqqa to bring us this inside look at ISIS's comeback.
When ISIS seized control of much of Syria and Iraq in 2014, their stated goal was to create an Islamic caliphate that would dominate the entire region with their extremist ideology. It took nearly 5 years for world powers to retake that territory, and even to this day, the scars of war are everywhere in northern Syria, reminders of the brutality of that conflict. Mohammed Ahmed has seen it firsthand, having been shot 6 times while fighting ISIS as an Iraqi soldier.
You see this piece of metal, like pipe, and they cut it, and they weld it, and they make a small hole, and they put explosive stuff inside it, and they make a charger inside it, and with wire, and they bomb like armored or tanks or people, and these things make like huge explosion.
Walking around this abandoned village in northern Syria, it's easy to see how the millions of people who have fled this conflict and gone to other places like Europe and Turkey and even the United States probably are not going to want to come back anytime soon. The animals are gone, their homes are practically destroyed, the wells have dried up, and moving back to this area would be very, very difficult. So that just means that it's going to continue to be costly to the entire world as more and more people become wards of the United Nations, the World Food Program, and other organizations that have to end up feeding these people to help them survive. Once the headquarters of the self-proclaimed ISIS caliphate, the city of Raqqa is still picking up the pieces after the terror group lost the city in 2017. But citizens say things are far better than before.
It's more better for the last time because we have safety, the safety for all children. This is our city. We love her. We love our city. We can't leave our city.
When ISIS was in control, they never knew if they'd live to see another day.
Die everywhere, and the ashes of people everywhere. The horrible, horrible thing in every minute in Raqqa. We can't think of anything more than bread.
But threats remain. ISIS has begun taking ground for the first time since 2017 and making coordinated attacks against civilian and military targets. This is the city of Kobani, and it saw some incredibly fierce fighting back in 2014, 2015 during a 5-month siege by ISIS. And the Kurdish forces eventually successfully drove them out. This was ISIS high watermark, but as you can see, there were some unbelievable battles here in that process. Now, ISIS is starting to reconstitute in Syria down south of here in a place called Deir ez-Zor. And so we're starting to see some attacks, and that means we may very well see ISIS resurging around the world in the months to come. Here in northeast Syria, Kurdish fighters are staying vigilant, determined not to let ISIS repeat the horrors of 2014. But these developments are especially concerning as the U.S. looks to end combat operations in neighboring Iraq, leaving many in the region fearing a repeat of the disastrous pullout of Afghanistan last August. And citizens are hoping American foreign policy won't leave them on their own.
Something give you the hope. We we looking to the hope. Right. Thank God. Now, a little hope, but it's good.
From Raqqa, northern Syria, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Still ahead, as modern technology continues to advance rapidly, could it cause some potential dangers for people of faith? We're going to take a look at that question right after this. One of the most important progressions of recent years is the rapid development in technology. High tech and artificial intelligence are fast becoming a big part of our daily lives, including household robots, as people spend more time every day with their smartphones, their computers, Alexa or Siri. Where does that put serving God? Gary Lane brings us this look at the spiritual dangers of a growing dependence on artificial intelligence and what it could pose to people of faith.
We live in a rapidly advancing world, dominated by intelligent computers and high-tech machines. Author Wallace Henley says this could take American society deeper into dangerous territory, a less human world, which replaces the creator with the created.
We have these machines emerging, and people are beginning to worship those machines. There's actually an AI church now. There's another technology specialist who said if this thing can go 1 billion times faster than the human brain, this machine, then the only thing that we can call it is God.
Henley is a Christian Post exclusive columnist and author of the book, Who Will Rule the Coming Gods? Appearing recently on CBN's The Global Lane, Henley suggests an excessive dependency on technology may draw people away from acknowledging and embracing God's supremacy.
Just about the time we're forgetting God, forgetting his transcendent majesty and our accountability to it, we're developing these machines that are taking his place.
A world where machines create a more leisurely and convenient society, but also one lacking accountability and dependency on God. Remember Rosie the robot from the 1960s cartoon The Jetsons?
I may be homely, Buster, but I'm S-M-A-R-T smart.
It's no longer science fiction. Today, less sophisticated robots are being used to vacuum floors, build automobiles, and deliver fast food.
Hello, here's your delivery.
And meet Amazon's Astro, a robot that monitors your home and follows you from room to room. Think of Alexa on wheels.
A robot?
Yes.
What are we going to do with a robot?
I kind of like having information at my fingertips in the palm of my hand, and I look forward to getting a robot someday that will mow my lawn, maybe even fix the plumbing. Anything wrong with that? When should I become morally and spiritually concerned?
There's nothing wrong with that, as long as we understand the utility of it. I'm thankful every time I go to a doctor and they have to probe me, and instead of opening my body and doing exploratory surgery, they can stick something inside of me and find out what's wrong. I like that. That's great. That's much better. But what's dangerous is when we forget that God is enthroned, that we were made for transcendence. The human being is wired for that.
Gospel music executive Marquise Boone shares that concern. He created JC, a computer-generated AI gospel music artist.
If you ever go to pieces, fall between the thunder clouds, I will put you back together. I won't let you down.
Boone suggests non-human techno singers like JC can be used to point music fans back to God.
We enjoy personalities, we enjoy their music, but we start to really idolize them. We start to really believe that these people are almost like gods, and that's not the goal of God, is to have us to redirect them only back to him for worship, not to make it about us.
Henley believes America's founding fathers understood the importance of divine accountability.
They said we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And whenever we don't understand that, then the state becomes dominant and the utility becomes the most important thing.
And he says when that happens, society changes for the worse. The slave era is just one example when human beings were treated as property. Henley believes the mindset is repeating itself in America today. People are being used without fellowship, without the bond that God wants us to have in relationships. He urges us to be on guard and aware of the standing that we give to God and technology in our life.
When we come to giving ourselves so completely, without knowing it, to the machines, we're in dangerous territory. St. Augustine said, the human heart was made by God and for God, and only God can fill it.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Coming up, a dog rescued after an avalanche hits him, and 2 hikers SOS saves the day after being missing for nearly a week. We've got both of these stories for you when we come back. Stay with us.
Yeah. Hey, you're okay.
That's a dog in Colorado, Apollo. He is thankful this year after being nearly knocked out by an avalanche. That video you saw captures the moment that he was being rescued after being buried in the snow. The dog actually triggered the slide and was swept over a cliff. Skiers nearby used probes and shovels to dig him out. The dog's owner called those rescuers heroes. Apollo he only suffered a leg injury, but other than that, he is doing just fine. Another great rescue story to share, a pair of hikers found after being missing for almost a week in Oregon. Christian Farnsworth and Parker Jasmer were found safe by a Coast Guard helicopter near the Swastika Mountain. Officials were able to locate the two because they wrote SOS in the snow and then stayed near their car. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. Today, I leave you with this thought to post, tag, tweet, and share with people in your circle. Arise daily with expectation in your heart. God stands ready to move in you, for you, and through you. He will then use you to bless others. With that word, I pray that you make this a terrific Tuesday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News channel or at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com, and join us right back here tomorrow.